So what is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So this episode of Dragon Ball Daima was an enlightening experience for me and the fandom. I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's definitely awakened the fandom to a new perception of Dragon Ball. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably know that I don't really look at Dragon Ball like most Dragon Ball YouTubers. One of the things that I love about Dragon Ball is that if you have an understanding of the subtle references and things that Toriyama plays on, there's almost a story within the story. It's almost like an inside joke in the sense that once you learn about some of the things that Toriyama took inspiration from, you can kind of see how that subtly plays into the narrative of the series, the designs, everything. So it's like a story within a story. It's like an inside joke, and that's one of the things that I've always really loved about Dragon Ball. And I'd really want to take advantage of this episode to sort of give you guys an example of how I perceive the series personally, like my personal perception of it. So after you watch this episode and you've kind of gotten my perspective on Dragon Ball, just go back and rewatch the series, rewatch this episode, and tell me if you can catch on to the same sort of things that I notice whenever I watch the series. But anyway, one thing I really love about Dragon Ball Daima so far is that they are making it very clear that they are focusing on lore behind the Dragon Balls themselves. Now, right off the bat, the language that they use for Dragon Ball Daima, the terminology, the way that they go about explaining things, is very different than a lot of previous Dragon Ball material. A lot of the stuff that has been considered subtext in the past, a lot of the stuff that I talk about on my channel, is sort of being brought to the surface in a new and more blatant way. So the fact that they open up by talking about how Goku has a gentle nature, and they also pay this homage to the original Dragon Ball, which, remember, like I've said on my channel before, within the context of the original Dragon Ball, Goku was not an alien. He was a little demon boy who practiced Buddhist martial arts and used that to tame his nature, and met a bunch of Journey to the West themed characters because he was himself based on a demon from Journey to the West, one of the most popular characters, Sun Wukong. And I really like how they use the art from Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball Minus. Now, they also, of course, reference the other aspect of Goku's nature, the fact that he comes from a race who craves battle and bloodshed, which is what Goku uses martial arts to essentially tame about himself. As I've said before, Raditz is really there to be an example of the other aspect of Goku's nature completely separate from his upbringing on Earth. Goku is basically what Bardock could have been had he had his nature changed at a much earlier age through the influence of someone like Grandpa Gohan or Gine, but also used martial art to constantly maintain their inner demonic nature. And I use that word demonic nature for a very important reason, which we'll get into very soon in this video, because the context of what the Saiyans are is changing in Dragon Ball Daima. And a lot of the stuff that I've talked about in the past, in terms of like Journey to the West references, a lot of the spiritual themes of Dragon Ball are about to be way more blatant after the introduction of Dragon Ball Daima. So if you watched any of my previous breakdowns of the trailers before Daima's release, you'll see that I predicted that it's very likely that the new King of the Demon Realm has a grudge against Babidi for taking over Dabura and using him as a weapon, and it turns out that is exactly the case. He does actually have a grudge against Babidi for doing this, but it doesn't seem like he is super emotionally connected to Dabura. It just kind of seems like he thinks that it's a slight against the Demon Realm that Babidi would use Dabura in that way and also try to take over the mortal realm and the demon realm using his magic. Now, something I really want to focus on for a minute is Dabura himself, because a lot of people don't understand what exactly Dabura is. They just kind of see the way he's portrayed in the Buu Saga and don't take the time to think about his background. But Dabura, like Kami or a number of other deities, his focus is on developing mortals. He is very similar to the Kaioshin, the Kai. His goal is to develop mortals into demonic entities. That is his overall goal. Now, how exactly he goes about developing mortals into what he wants, same thing with the Kaioshin and everybody else involved here, is a combination of magic and science. And we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. Now, when they start questioning how such powerful beings can exist in the outside world, I want you to look at this terminology very carefully, because they specify the outside world, which means the demon realm themselves are used to very powerful beings existing within the demon realm but not within the mortal realm. And I find that very, very interesting, and there's a lot of context that adds to this conversation if you really think about it carefully. Now, another very subtle thing I want you to pick up on here is the fact that there is a Majin M on Vegeta's head behind Goma as he is giving this speech about how such powerful beings can exist in the outside world. I wonder why such powerful beings can exist in the outside world. It's almost as if we're seeing a first-hand account of why such powerful beings can exist outside of their world. The answer is right in front of him, interestingly enough. Now, this is where things get very, very, very interesting. So, the reason that the demon realm is used to powerful beings existing within their realm is because of the existence of beings known as Majin. But when they question whether or not the Saiyans are Majin, they talk about how it's impossible because their ears are round. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the Saiyans' ears are not always round. There is a specific transformation that they take up that I have pointed out on my channel multiple times is associated with demons and the demonic nature of the Saiyans themselves, and that is the Great Eight transformation. Now remember, Goku, during his original conception, his initial introduction, was actually a demon-themed character because the character that he himself was based on was a demon, Sun Wukong. And it is very, very common in some Wukong-based media for some Wukong to have a Great Eight transformation. And this transformation in this media is always a reference to his demonic nature, which exists in a dualistic sense with his Buddha nature. So he's got one half of his nature, which is what is known as his Buddha nature, and the other half of his nature, which is what's known as his demonic nature. And Goku, as a kid, has always been characterized to reflect Sun Wukong's Buddha nature, and the Great Ape form has always been characterized to represent his demonic nature. Toriyama rebranded demons as aliens in the Dragon Ball Z era in order to change things up, make things a little bit more interesting, make things more sci-fi and interesting, right? And now it seems that everything is coming full circle. Now, something I want you to notice is that, remember, as I pointed out on my channel before, flying is technically considered a jutsu in Dragon Ball, which is considered magic. Now, in Journey to the West, there are beings known as Yao Guai, and they are beings that are essentially created in some sense through magical means. They are better at using magic as an extension of being Yao Guai. A lot of the characters, including Sun Wukong himself, but a lot of the characters that Sun Wukong fought are Yao Guai. They are demons in the sense that they become demons by giving into their survival instincts, their inner demonic nature, and a lot of times their animal-like forms are a reflection of their personality traits, which is why you have like the bear demon, the pig demon, etc., things of that nature, because they become a demon by embracing what makes them evil, and what makes them evil are different types of personality traits. But the Yao Guai themselves are not necessarily evil. They are just magical creatures, and in some sense are created through some form of magical influence, or even a natural magical occurrence, which can happen. Sun Wukong himself was born of a stone egg that was subjected to a mass amount of yin and yang energy, and that is essentially his origin, is that he was created through magical means through a mass amount of chi, because chi is just the combination of yin and yang energy. Speaking of chi, I'm going to put a link to a video, I'm going to pin it at the top of this video, that explains chi. There is a channel run by a couple of really cool guys. One of them has a master's degree in Chinese medicine, and they explain to you in detail what chi is. But chi itself is essentially magic. That's right, you heard me. And Sun Wukong himself was also adept at using magic in the form of chi. The entire reason that he could maintain immortality is due to using magic to manipulate his chi. The entire reason he could do a lot of the abilities that he could do in the series is due to the usage of chi. So the use of chi is considered magic. I know that kind of recontextualizes, what chi is for people, but that's always been the case in Chinese mythology. It's always been considered the magical life energy that people implement to use as a weapon. The ability to manipulate chi is reality manipulation in the sense that you are actually manipulating the energy that the universe and you yourself are composed of. That's why they talk about how they can fire light from their hands, light energy. So after the new Demon King learns of Dabura's defeat, you can kind of see the Makaiyoshin's sinister nature coming out more. Essentially, I think he sees Goma as a easily manipulated figure, and that's essentially the motivation here, is that in comparison to Dabura, he's a very, very easily manipulated king. It's the classic. It's really, really interesting because the Majin Buu saga was originally themed around Arabian Nights, and this has a very, very Aladdin-like feel to it in the sense that this Makaiyoshin is a very Jafar-like figure in the sense that he is trying to manipulate the king, or, you know, like in Aladdin, the Sultan, right? So essentially they find out that Buu killed Babidi, Dabura was defeated, etc. They're learning all kinds of revelations about what happened on Earth. But one of the most interesting things that the fandom is losing their mind over is the fact that Piccolo is, in fact, and always has been, a demon. And this is not news to me. Like, it's been very, very obvious to me for a very, very long time that he was a demon-themed character. I've talked about it on my channel for a very, very, very long time. And they immediately cut from talking about Piccolo being a demon to showing Majin Vegeta. And that's very, very important. I want you to remember that because that is a hint at what they're going to do with the respective characters. I want you to remember that Vegeta and Piccolo are important and have a lot in common due to the fact that they represent their lineages. They represent their ancestors. They represent the Namekians and the Saiyans as a whole, their culture, their background. And that's something that Dragon Ball Daima is going to heavily, heavily play on. And they are openly searching for Namekians, which has very, very heavy implications, and I'm going to get into that soon. I am so excited to talk about the possible implications for the Saiyans and the Namekians in the future. You guys have no idea. Here is where they point out that the Namekians escaped to the outside world, meaning it is 1,000% confirmed that the Namekians are from the Demon Realm, which is amazing. Now, why is that important? Well, it suggests that the Namekians are a project commissioned by the Demon Realm. And this is going to get into some crazy background stuff for the Namekians and the Saiyans. I can already tell, but I want to get into my theory as to what exactly is going on here. Now, as I've stated before, the Demon Realm, and we've seen this with like Toa and different characters, are willing to use magic and science in order to meddle with what exactly mortals are, right? So, I am suggesting here that the Namekians are an experiment. I am suggesting that the Namekians are an experiment of the Demon Realm, and that explains why they stole shavings from the Dragon Balls and have such a ancient story and culture, is that they are essentially the result of the Demon Realm trying to meddle with mortals and create superior mortals to that of the regular universe using magic. And that is the reason that Piccolo and the Namekians in general use magic, very, very similar to the Demon Realm. That is the reason that they are so naturally powerful, because they have been manipulated by the Makaiyoshin and by the Demon Realm themselves to be a special entity, a special being that they themselves have crafted and were going to use for a specific purpose. Now, Dr. Arinsu is the new character that's introduced, and I find her very, very, very interesting because she is essentially the new Toa of Dragon Ball Daima in the sense that she's a scientist who also uses magic. Now, here's where things get kind of obvious in terms of like where the plot is going. So they bring up the fact that Dabura always funded her research, and I want you to remember this. This is very, very, very important. Her research has not been shown to us yet. We don't know what exactly she researches, but she is a Kai, okay? Remember, she's a Kai. The Kai's goal are to develop and create mortals. Now think back to, I don't know, King Piccolo. Do you remember what King Piccolo was capable of? The dude could puke out other demons. When he was separated from Kami and he had become pure evil, he could produce even more demons. Now the Namekians are going to be treated as the dual nature at its center point of the Namekians. They are essentially always trying to maintain balance. That's the reason the Super Namekian was a combination of Kami and Piccolo, good and evil, the dual nature of the Namekians, purified by the practice of martial arts. That is the reason that is such an impactful scene and so important, because at a baseline, they represent the dual nature of their species. And I pointed out before that the Namekians themselves, their culture is very, very similar to Buddhist culture in the sense that they have a warrior clan, and a religious clan that are in charge of two different aspects of their culture. The martial monks would travel with the religious monks and purify towns using an item known as the Shintamani stone, which, as I've talked about in my other previous videos, is the clear inspiration for the Dragon Balls. Now, something else I want you to notice here is that Majin Buu is a legend in the demon realm, which means Majin Buu also originated from the demon realm. That's something a lot of people have not been talking about. Now, a really cool development that we have here is the idea that they can now use the Dragon Balls, which they could not use the Dragon Balls in the Demon Realm, and we'll get into that here in a minute. The Demon Realm has their own Dragon Balls, but they couldn't use them. And we also get some really cool new lore for the Dragon Balls that kind of alludes to things that I've said in the past about the Dragon Balls. So they state that the Dragon Ball's power is based in white magic, and that due to that they can't make a black wish. Sounds very much like the selfish wish, selfless wish terminology, but a little bit different. So the idea that there are Dragon Balls that can be made with black magic and be capable of different things than the white magic Dragon Balls suggests that the demonic Dragon Balls that we're going to be introduced to here soon have different capabilities than the Dragon Balls that can be used on Earth due to the fact that they are made using white magic. And the idea that they're made using white magic in itself is also very, very interesting because, remember, they were made by Kami. They were made by a purified Namekian. So the entire reason that they make them young is because making them young is not a quote-unquote black wish. It's not an evil wish, per se. And then the doctor pops back up and asks them to make her young, which is interesting because she doesn't even really look that old. Now, Degesu also suggests that he would like a wish. So all that's important because that basically shows that all of these characters are sort of working against each other secretly. And that's very, very interesting. And then they bring up this legendary artifact, and we also get a lore drop in terms of Abura, Dabura's father, which is, of course, a pun on abracadabra. Now, I do think that Goma will get this, and he will be the one to use it. A lot of people are guessing that other characters are going to get to use it. A character that we're going to be introduced here in just a minute. A lot of people have suggested this new Namekian character that we're going to see here in just a minute is going to use it. I don't. I think Goma is going to be the one to use it, and it just makes sense to me because he's so weak and because he isn't strong enough to really enforce his rule right now. It just makes a lot of sense to me that if he had this power that he could then enforce his rule and he would become a threat to the Kai, who are just trying to manipulate him due to the fact that he is weak, and also all the other characters. So yeah, Degesu reveals that he would like to have a wish as well. And then we are introduced to Neva the Namek. Now, Neva the Namek is probably the most interesting character to me personally. Now, he is stated to be senile, but no one else knows as much about the Dragon Balls as him, and to me that makes him a very interesting character. And also the fact that the characters in the Demon Realm knew about the black magic, white magic nature of the Dragon Balls suggests that they themselves actually know more about the Dragon Balls than the average character. So there's going to be tons and tons of lore and stuff added to the context of the Dragon Balls, for sure. Now, the next new character that we are introduced to is the Tamagami. Now, I want you to understand why the Tamagami are important. Now, Neva, the new Namekian that we are introduced to, is the one that created the Tamagami to protect the Dragon Balls. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that Kami had a trial that he would put... The entire reason that the Dragon Balls were spread throughout Earth by Kami was to put the user through a trial that would test their character to make sure that the person who used the Dragon Balls was pure of heart. And the Namekians themselves also had a vetting process for making sure that whoever used the Dragon Balls was up to their standards. So the Tamagami is being used here as a stand-in for the trials that Kami put in place on Earth, and also the Namekians put in place amongst their race and their people as well. Now, this is also hinting at stuff. This is something that I've noticed that a lot of people have not caught on to. Now, if Goma was to get a hold of the third eye and become powerful enough to defeat the Tamagami, he could then use these Dragon Balls on a black wish, which means that he wouldn't be bound to the rules of Dragon Balls created by light magic. I think that that is overall Goma's master plan. And I also think that that is part of the reason that they were created and put in place by this new Namekian character, is to prevent things like that from happening. He himself probably has a standard for what he thinks the Dragon Balls should be used for, and that's probably due to a very, very similar process that the Namekians themselves have been put through in the past, but opposite. I think he clearly has his own standard for what he thinks the Dragon Ball should be used for, and I think that's going to be very, very important in the future. Now, something I want you to pay attention to is the fact that this character is so excited and happy to learn of the existence of other Namekians, because I think, and I'm going to talk about this more in a future video, I think that the ideal user of the Dragon Balls, in this character's opinion, is a Namek. So when Neva shows up, he is very, very happy to see another Namekian. He hasn't seen one in thousands of years. This is also when it's revealed to Dende and to Mr. Popo that they are also demons due to the fact that they have pointy ears. Now, the pointy ears, meaning that you're from the demon realm, is something that I really want to get into. Essentially, what I think is going on here is that a bunch of species from the demon realm, and what makes these species special is the fact that they were influenced by magic, or magic was introduced in the process of their development as mortals. That is what makes them demons, is the fact that they come from a realm where they were influenced by magic. So all of these aliens that you see who have pointy ears, they're likely the result of the same thing. They may seem like aliens, but aliens are being rebranded as demons, just as demons were rebranded as aliens from the original Dragon Ball into the Dragon Ball Z era. We are literally coming full circle. Now, the thing I find very, very interesting about Neva is the fact that he is so powerful that he literally reverses the stone effect that happens to the Dragon Balls whenever they are used, and he also brings all of them to the tower just using his magic. So he is ridiculously, ridiculously powerful, and I actually think he's way more wise than people think. And I essentially think that the purpose of this character is, like I said in my previous video, that he is an anti-kami. Like, he essentially has his own standard for mortals that complements the demon realm. He wants to develop mortals in a very, very similar way to the demon realm. He has his own process for developing mortals, and all the stuff that I talked about in my videos about the Dragon Balls before, this is like the reverse of that. Everything that has been implemented in the actual universe to develop mortals, including the Dragon Balls, is also being implemented in the demon realm, but for the opposite purpose, to develop demonic entities. And that is this character's purpose. He is essentially an anti-kami. He has the same role as Kami, but in terms of his goal is to develop demonic entities. Episode, of course, ends with the main cast being turned into children. Now, the main thing I wanted to talk about in this video was the possible origin of the Saiyans and the confirmed origin of the Namekians. Now, I'm not going to get too much into my theory because I want to really take the time to think about it and really put some thought into it and really be able to communicate to you what exactly I think is going on in the best way humanly possible. But I do think that the Saiyans only exist due to the influence of magic. And that's all I'm going to say for now. It's very, very, very possible that both the Kaioshin and the Makaioshin, the yin and yang of the creative force of the universe, is responsible for the creation of the Saiyans. I don't think that it's a coincidence that the Saiyans are super hyper evolutionary beings who are ridiculously powerful. I also don't think it's a coincidence that they have such a strong dual nature, and I also don't think it's a coincidence that when they take on the great ape form that they have a demonic presence. When Vegeta first shows up in Dragon Ball Z, Krillin talks about how he has a demonic aura. Tien also talks about how Piccolo has a demonic aura. And one very, very important thing to notice is, despite the fact that Vegeta becomes a great ape, he had the demonic aura prior to the great ape because his personality matches that of pure evil. That's the reason he can talk through the great ape state. He's just as demonic in base as he is as a great ape. So Piccolo and Goku, and Vegeta and Goku being introduced to each other in that sense, are characters being introduced on two different ends of the mortal developmental spectrum. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'll be putting out way more content now that Daima is out. So I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.